Hello guys, welcome back. In this video we are going to test our application, not application but the API which we have created in the previous video, and then we'll test create and login API, and for that I'm going to use Postman. First let's go back in code and we'll see quick recap what we did so far and what we'll and then we'll trigger the API from the Postman. So far guys, we have created two APIs. That is, first one is going to be of course the login API, and then second one is going to be the create user API. So what we are going to do is we are going to test both of the API in this video, and for that let me quickly see open the Postman. So this is what Postman interface look like, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new collection, and then I'm going to name it as, let's say, blank collection I'm going to create, and I will name it as bookshop. So it is going to be bookshop, right? And then what I'm going to do is I can just, you can see three dot here, right? So just click on that and then you can select add request, or you can add request from here as well, but let me add from here, add request, and we are going to add a new API request from here. What I will name it as a create user, right? API name is going to be create user, and of course we make the API as a post API, I believe. Let's go back in user route and check. Yeah, we had created with the name post, sorry, with the method post. And then here what I'm going to do is, here you can select all those methods which you are going to use in your application. So in this here I'm going to select post, since post is going to be the method that I have registered on this create functionality, and here I'm going to use HTTP, and by default your application is going to run on which port? Localhost, and we have defined there 8667, right? That is going to be the port. And finally here what I'm going to say is, okay, the request will go on the route here, and then it should come on user's route. Since user route, then further it will have that add API over here, right, to create the user. So I'll go back here and then I'll say users and then add right? And also we saw that in our controller we were expecting data in the form of raw JSON, right? So we have for that we have used context, gin-gonic, to bind those data to our DTO or model, right? So then that data should be coming in API, from API, and here we need to select what? The raw raw request, and then of course it will be a JSON data. So here what I will do is I will create a JSON object, and here I'm going to put email, and here I'm going to put my email zdhussain21@gmail.com. You can put your email as well. So then I'm going to use password here, and password is going to be, let's say, password. Actually you need to select a very strong password so that it can be very secure and very hard to decrypt. So next what I'm going to do is what are all those details which is required here? We can go back to user model, and there we have user create DTO, right? So here name, email, and password is required. So I'm going to pass name, email. Okay, name is also required. So I'm going to pass name, and then I'm going to pass Mohammad Zaid Hussain. All right. And then finally I'm going to trigger request, right? And how we can do that is we have the send button over here. So if we'll just click on this send button, then we should be expecting the request will come here on the controller. Let's see that in action. Just I will click the send button. You can see we got 200 success response. Let's go back in VS Code and we'll see what happens here. So you can see bad request cannot unmarshal into an object ID. The length must be 24. Cannot unmarshal into object ID, right? There's some error occurred which we need to debug. And of course, this is the process we are going to flow throughout our application. We will be getting a lot of error, and we will be resolving all those errors as per the expectation. So from where this error is coming, let's go back to controller, user controller. Of course it should be coming here, and then how we can trace the error, right? In the previous video we talked about we are going to return error in the specified format. So here we are returning error as a 400 bad request. Then we can say this error might be originating from here, right? So but since we are not handling this error somewhere in the program, that's why we are unable to catch it here, and the request is going forward, and we are getting back the 200 response. Let's go back to database and we'll check there as well if it is being successfully saved, or we need to just check it. I will just click refresh database, and we can see that there's no user database created over here, right? That means the data has not been saved yet. So for that, what I'll do is I'll go back here, and then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to debug this. And how we can debug our application, we are not going to put fmt.println, or we are not going to do it with using print statement. It is taking a lot of time, right? So for that, what I will do here is I will just go here and I will create a launch.json file. What this will do is it will create a configuration, go launch configuration file. So based on the configuration, basically it will attach one debugger to our Golang application, and once the request come, then we can put a debugger on the line where we want, right? So since you can see here, one file has been created, folder.vscode, and inside that launch.json has been created, right? But the thing is, this is still not pointing to the specific Go module. So for that, we have to explicitly say if this VS Code is created outside of this server folder, right? We have to go inside the server folder and then run our application through this. Right, for that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use workspace folder. So this is going to bookshop is going to be workspace folder, and here I'm going to put / and then we should go inside the server folder, right? So once it will go inside server folder, then all those files which is inside the server folder should be able to debug. Okay, then we should be able to basically put a debug pointer on any of the line in any of the file where we want. So let me just quickly save it, and I'll go back, I'll close this file. This is run and debug. You can see this is the icon we need to click, and here we just need to, okay, we are seeing here launch program, right? So for our Go application, what I'm going to do is I am just going to name it as debug, let's say debug, or we can say Go debug, so that we can identify that easily, and it will be easier for us to select the configuration and run the command. So here what I need to do is I will just click on this play icon and then it is saying that DLV command is not available, run go install -v DLV, right? So for debugging Golang application, what we need to do is we need to install this package, and for that I am going to just copy this. First I'll just close the application, I'll clear the console, and then I'll paste the command here so that this DLV is installed. Using this DLV only, we are going to attach debugger to our Golang application. So you can see here download has been started. We'll wait a couple of minutes, and then once it is downloaded, we'll resume our flow. Now we can see that that package has been installed successfully, and then finally we'll just try to run the application once more using debugger, and we'll see if that works. So I just clicked on this Go debug, and the debugger should be attached now. I will just close this pop-up from here. Let me re-click on it and we'll see. So yeah, you can see that in debug console, this DAP server listening at it, this. Now the application should run properly with the debugger attached. So let's wait for that, and once the application has started, we'll start debugging. So finally the application has been started as debugger is attached, and then what I'm going to do is, you can see here our application has started, but we have started this in a debug mode so that we are able to debug the code. So what next I'm going to do here is, since we are calling this create user API, right? So create user will anyway going to land on this specific controller, and then what we are going to do is we are going to put a breakpoint over here. This is called breakpoint if you are not aware of it. So what this will do is, actually when I will trigger this API from outside of this application, when the API reaches here, right, request will reach here, it will just wait for that line to get executed until I will just pause or click on play icon. This way we can put any number of breakpoint on any line, and then we can make sure like on every line the data is as per our expectation. So let me just trigger that request once more from here, and then you can see here it is getting prompted over here, right? The line is getting colored with yellow, and then finally what I'll do is I will put one breakpoint over here and one breakpoint over here, so that on each of the line I should be able to test it whether I'm getting the data in the expected format or not. So I'll just click on play, and then we saw here error is not equals to nil. That means it is throwing error here itself at the time of binding those data to this DTO. So here what I will do is I will just hover on this error, or if you don't want to hover, you can see here watch, right? So you can expand it a bit more to the right, and then here you can just type those variable. So I'll just click on error, and you should be able to see that over here, error over here. What the error here is, I will just see that error cannot unmarshal into object ID, the length must be 24 and it is 0. That means there is some problem with this DTO when we have created. So what I'll do is I'll just click play, and then finally what I'll do is, when you click play, that means it will go to the next debug pointer line if it is there. If it is not there, means it will finally break all the debug pointer and return back the result, or it will just execute successfully next line of the code. So what I will do is I will just go here in user create DTO. You can see here password I have mentioned as primitive dot object ID, right? But the password is expected to be a string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put here a string, and then it should be working fine. For that, what we can do is, since we were using while we were running this application as a normal application, right, using air command, so air was looking it throughout this file, and as soon as there is changes, and then what air was doing is it was compiling this application once more and then building the latest version of the application, so we don't have to worry about rerun it, right? But when we are going to run with debugger on, of course I have to just restart that, or else I have to go back to launch.json and reconfigure that, so that every time we change this, it should restart from the scratch. I mean, it should restart with the fresh build. So that's the expectation is. Let's see how it works. Now I just clicked on restart, and it is prompting me to allow access. I will just give access, and then finally you can see here on the console all the lines has been printed, like application is running successfully on port 8667, right? So again I will go back to Postman, and I will trigger this API send. Then again this request is coming here, since we have breakpoint over that line and it is showing as yellow. So I'll click on this continue icon, means when I'll click this continue icon, it will go to the next breakpoint line. But there's a couple of more options here. Step over, what it will do is it will go through each of the line one by one, and then it will proceed further. So as of now I don't need that, so I'll just click on play, and you can see there's no error, since it breakpoint doesn't hit over here and the code execution doesn't go inside the error block. So I can just remove this breakpoint over here, and then finally I can remove breakpoint from here as well, and I'll just click on play.
So now let's see if it works or not. Okay, here we can see server selection error, context cancelled. That means there is some issue with the database. Database has not yet been connected properly, or there might be some different issue which we need to look up. So what that issue can be, we'll see that in action. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back in the dbconfig file, and here I'm going to see whether we have those messages. Okay, we have those messages, database connected successfully, but then why it is not working, right? Context cancelled with current topology single server and type unknown. What does it mean? When I'm not sure about the error, what exactly this error is giving. So what I'll do is I'll just copy paste this error on Google, and I'll try to find out certain blocks related to it. Possibly we can find something. Let's see. So I'll just copy here and I'll go back to Google. What I'll do here is I'll just paste it here and try to search it. So as we can see, there's a lot of blocks or Stack Overflow feed there. If you don't know about what Stack Overflow is nothing but it's you can say community where lot other developers are connecting with each other using posting the error, or they are replying back on the same error. So that's what we are doing here. What here we need to do is, we can see here Mongo, that is not going to help us. And then alright, even our database is connected to MongoDB bookshop, right? We can see over here localhost 27017. We should be able to connect to this test collection as well. That is also connecting. That means there must be some issue with the application itself. So here what I'm going to do is, I will just I'll just try to debug this if we are getting database URL or everything properly or not. For that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to restart the application so that this is getting called and then database has to be initialized. Let's see that. Okay, it's coming here, and then we can see database URL is there, mongodb/localhost, and then / we have dbnum over there, right? So once that is done, here what we'll get is context, and then I'll click next. And here, if everything goes well, we should be able to get the client, and we are getting the client over here. That's correct, and then it should be working fine. So what's the error? Let me just click play. Okay, it's again executed and it's asking me for some. Okay, firewall is blocked, so I've given access for that. And then finally what we can do is we can go back to console and we can check for any of the error which is prompting over there. So there's no error as of now. So far we don't have any error over here, and database has been connected successfully. So what I'll do is I'll try to hit the request once more from the postman, and then let's see what happens. So again we are not getting any result. That means still we have some error over there, cancelled while checking out a connection from connection pool, context cancelled. I hope there's some issue with this context timeout. So for now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use context.background instead of this context. What I'll do here is I'll just comment out this line, and then I will comment out this line as well. And instead of context with timeout, here I'm going to put just context.background. So later on we'll just try to rectify it. Means this is going to take the background context and then connect with the MongoDB and then perform its operation. We'll see that why this is not working properly. We'll see that later, but for now we are just going to comment this out and use the context background for the simplicity of this tutorial. So I will just restart the application and let's see how it works. It's getting restarted, and what I'll do is I will go back to postman and then I'll try re-hitting this API. Before that, I need to make sure whether the application has been started or not. For that, let's wait for a few seconds, and actually this should have started as soon as possible. So okay, this triggers here, and I'll just click play and play. Okay, now it is asking me to allow access. I'll just give the access, and then finally it should be working. I believe this time it should be working. What I'll do is I'll go back to Postman, I'll hit the request once more, and still we are getting that error over here. So now what I can do is, without wasting much time, I will just copy this error from here. I'll copy this error from here, and then I'll go back to, if you guys are aware of the ChatGPT, right, that is an AI tool which we are going to use now, since that is going to make our development much easier. If I'm going to search for the same, right, I'm going to use it over and over lot of blog feed, and at some point of time it may break something, right? Not break, but it may take a lot of time. So I'll just search over here and we will see what's the error. The context object associated with the connection request was cancelled. This could be because of a timeout or explicit cancellation, right? For instance, if you use tongs, okay. So it is saying the same thing over here, increase the timeout and then do the operation, right? So for that, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here and let's uncomment this line. This is not going to be issue. So here I'm going to use the same context, and then I will save it. All right. And then one more thing I want to make sure, I'll just go in the repository from where I'm using that get session context, right? Here I was using get session context, which is going to create one new session context, right? So this is working or not, I'm not sure about this, because this is how it should be. It should be working basically, because all the logical things we did here so far is correct. And then let's see how it goes. What we are going to do here is we are just going to put one breakpoint over here, and of course this has to be cancelled afterwards. That means this request is taking more than 10 seconds, or you can say it's getting cancelled before performing the CRUD operation into the database or collection. So let's just restart this and we will try to debug. Actually, this is the way we are developing application in the enterprise level application. This is the way we are doing everywhere, and this is how we are making sure, like, we should not leave any bug over there, and we should rectify all those. Obviously we should throw out all of the bug from our application. So application has been started. Let me just trigger the request once more and we'll see that what is happening over there. So this is working fine, and then defer.cancel, we have cancel over there. Actually this cancel should not be invoked immediately. Okay, this is running in your Mongo context, and then again we are going to get the same error, right? Let me just rectify this error, and then meanwhile, if you guys are interested, you can search for this error, why we are getting this error, and then we'll continue it from there, right? Okay, now I found out the issue. Maybe that is happening because of this session timeout. It's taking more than that second, and then in between this defer cancel is getting called, and then the session is going to be cancelled, right? For that, what I'm going to do here is, instead of this, I'm just going to comment this, and I'm going to use const I have used, right? So I'm just going to use the background for that, context dot background, right? So then now let me restart the application, and finally we'll hit and test if it works fine, right? For that, what I'll do is I'll just close this pop-up. Let's wait a couple of seconds and then we'll finally test it. Actually my system is running too slow, but in your case it should be working very fast. That's the beauty of actually Golang. Okay, now the application is started finally, and what we are going to do is we are going to trigger the request from the postman. We'll just click on send, and then we can see here we got the object back, and what it is returning is inserted ID, right? So now this is what we are returning from there, so we don't have to worry about this. We can in the later in this tutorial we are going to more structure it so that the data which we want will get those data in the specific format. As of now we have returned data, message and status code. That is completely fine, but inserted ID, instead of inserted ID, if you want to return more data, of course you can return more data, and then based on that we will be performing some action in the client, right? So but for now this application is this API is working properly fine. We should be able to add the data in the DB, right? So let's go back there in DB and we'll verify it here if this is working fine. So what I'll do is I'll just click on refresh database, and you can see here we have one more. Okay, test DB is there, and then inside that this user collection is created. Why this happens? Even though we have given the database name over there, right? But it is not picking that database. From where then this test DB is coming? So we'll go back inside DB configuration, and it is taking out the default DB name. And why this happens? Because it is expecting some DB name. If we are not going to provide those DB name over here, so what it is going to do is it is going to take out the default DB name and perform it operation. But this is not the way we are going to do. Instead we have to use this get database collection, and then we'll pass the DB name over there. And where we have used this, we have used this here. Here it should be working with the DB name. So get Mongo repository we are using where, so from there itself it should be database name should be passed there, right? So get env property database name. So we'll go inside get env property and we should find database name if it is there or not. So we can see here database name is there and MongoDB name. I will just copy it, Mongo underscore and DB name, and then finally where I will go in env. Why we are going there? Because in the beginning, very beginning, I said this all those env properties going to reside in .env file, right? That is going to be a secret file. So I'll just go inside env, and then we can see here MongoDB name is already there. Then why it is not able to pick this file, right? So it is actually there. So we don't have to worry about this. Let's save it and go back to repository over here. What I'll do here is I'll go into env property, alright, and then we'll see here if we have successfully initialized it. Of course we have initialized it, database name is there, right? So MongoDB name it will pick up, and then it should be working fine. Then what is the issue there? Why it is taking out the default name, right? So for that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to this file, right? And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the DB name from here, right? And then I will just copy it from here and paste it. Right now I'm going to pass this DB name here so that we can check, we can debug this. We should be able to debug this and check whether we are passing the correct value over here or not. So what I'll do here is I'll just click a breakpoint over here and then restart the application so that the latest changes is there with the current build, and we should be able to debug this. So we should be able to see what database name is getting passed from here and then how it is working, right? For that we can see here it is coming here and the database name is bookshop. So it should actually work with the bookshop. Let me click play and then I'll check once more. Again bookshop is coming, that's correctly fine, and I'll click allow. So actually this application should get connected with the bookshop database, not the test database. So when it will go here it is expecting DB name, and of course we are providing those DB name to the get database collection, right? So then it should be connected with the DB name, not the default DB, default test DB, right? So how we can make sure like why this is coming? So for that we are again going back to our application and we'll debug couple of things and we'll make sure like okay we are getting this database collection or not. So here what I'm going to check is I'm just going to put one breakpoint and then we are going to see if this works fine or not. So let me just okay, what it will do is if it is going to be empty then and db name not equals to nil, of course db name is not going to be nil, right? So this condition is actually wrong. By seeing this itself I can point it out like this is wrong, because db name, if db name is coming there and then it is not nil, then it will go inside and take out the default db. So here is the fault, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all those breakpoints from here. You can see a small icon, a small close icon here. You can just click on that icon and remove all those breakpoints from here. And then here what I'm going to do is I'll just match it with a nil. If it is nil, then we are going to take the test db. So let me restart the application and we'll see that in action. Now the application is getting restarted and then we'll just trigger this API once more. For that what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow access, and then here what I'm going to do is I don't need this test db anymore over here, so I will just click on it, delete, and then we have to provide the db name exactly, so that we can make sure like okay we are going to delete this for sure. So I'll click on drop database and then that database has been deleted. This time our application should be connecting with bookshop, right? Bookshop database. So now let's go back to our postman and then we are going to just click send and let's see how it works. Now data has been inserted successfully, and this time we are going to verify again. What I'm going to do is I'll be just clicking this 3-dot icon and then refresh databases. Now you can see this time our application is connected to bookshop, and then we have the user collection created over here. If I'll click on this user collection, you can see here the detail which we sent from our client, right? Those detail has been saved in the database successfully, and then we should be able to get it as well, right? So for that we created a login API so that we can match with the email and password. Whether it matches successfully, then based on that we will be getting the user data. For that let's create that API and we'll trigger that from postman as well. So I'm just going to save this API, control S, and then I'm going to create one more API here. I will click on add request, and then this API is going to be post API and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link, right? We need this link. This link is actually the API path, all right? So whatever request you are triggering from here will land on this path, and then this request method will get matched and the respective corresponding controller function will get invoked, right? This is how the API request works, and we'll finally get the response back once the function executed successfully. That's the beauty of the API. We should be able to execute it from anywhere in the world, right? So now what I'm going to do is, of course, for login also we are expecting some data, and how we can verify that, we are going back in our application, and here we can see we have the auth controller over there, and we are expecting data in the format of login DTO, right? So login DTO is expecting nothing but email and the password, right? We'll just pass email and the password. Based on that it will match from the database, like the user which has already been saved in the database will match those user, and then based on that will return the user data if it matches successfully, or we'll just throw the error. We'll see that here. So in this case what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to routes and then verify what routes I have used for this. So I've used the post method, and then the path is going to be /login. One more thing I'm going to verify, the base path. So the base path we have defined over here, it is going to be inside auth route, right? So for that what I'm going to do is, instead of users this time I'm going to put auth, and then the path is going to be login, right? Now inside body we need to select raw JSON, right? We have a couple of more option over here. Text, if you want to send any text data or HTML or XML data, right? So you can use as per your need, but this time we are going to use raw JSON data. So I'm going to use raw, not this time, but throughout the application I'll be using raw JSON data to send the to send the request or requested data in the body or wherever. So now here I'm going to put email. So for that what I'll do is I'll just save it and go back to create user. Here we have that object ready. I'll just copy it without wasting much time, and I'll come back here. I can say this is going to be login API. We'll save it. I will paste it over there. We don't need this name over here, right? So I can remove this name and I'll save this. I'll just trigger this request. We didn't get any response back. That means there must be some error there. So we'll go back and then we see email is not an object ID, right? So that means no documents in result. We didn't get any documents in result. And why is that so? We are going to debug that as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to go back in the auth controller, and then here we will be getting the result, right? Not result but the request body, right? So I'm going to put one breakpoint over here and then one breakpoint over here as well, right? Not here, but I'm going to put one breakpoint over here. If let's say any error occurs while mapping those data to the DTO at the time of request coming, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to request that again, and then you can see here there's no error, and we have a couple of data in the email as password, right? So now what we can do is we can go inside, or we can just put here one more breakpoint, and then we can go inside this function as well, login function. So we are not going to debug this. Of course we are going to use this login function since the logic is been implemented here. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one breakpoint over there and then here as well. Now one more thing I need to do is I need to go inside this function, since this function I believe is throwing error or giving back error. So this function has implemented here, and then here what I'm going to do is find one user by email, right? This is the user service actually, and here I'll just put a breakpoint and then we'll see what we are getting over here. But I have a couple of dot over here as well. So what I will do is I'll go one step more inside that and I'll open this find one by key as well. So here we have implemented find one by key, and here we will put the breakpoint, and just before calling the find one I'll put breakpoint here as well, so that we can see in which block this find one get executed and how it is working, right? So this time just I'm going to click play. It will come here inside the service, that is fine. Then it will go inside the user service, that is also fine, since we have used the user service inside the auth service. And then I'll click play. Now it is coming here. We can see here error is not equals to nil. Why is that so? The provided hex ID is not a valid ID. That's totally correct. And key here is email, right? And the value here is of course this data, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on play, and then I'm going to see the key is going to be email, of course, and the actual value is cool. So since it is coming inside error not equals to nil, in this case actually we should be calling that with the value, right? Actual value, but we have passed those inside the else condition and then use the actual value here. That is correct. That is why it is not able to find any object. So we found out the error, and then I'm going to remove all those breakpoint and I'll just click play. So you can see here no document in the result. That is coming from here only. All right, not here, I'm sorry, that is coming from here, this error, after decoding that, because there's no object in the document, no result in the document. So for that what I'm going to do here is, in case of if it is not ID, that means it is going to be value, which we have passed as a raw value here in the function. And if it is not, and if it is an ID, what I'm going to do here is, of course, it is going to be an actual value. This is not going to be actual value. Instead, I'm going to call it as a obj ID, all right, which suits also, which defined it much better. So I'm going to use object ID over here. Fine. I'll just click save and restart the program. Alright, it is getting restarted. You can see the application has been started successfully, and I'll just click on allow. Finally, we'll go inside Postman and I will try to execute the request. I'll just click on send, and then we can see here we get those data over here inside the data, right? That's what we are sending from our code, and the token this time is going to be null. Why we are going to use token, that we'll see in upcoming videos, but for the time being we can see that we got the user object and we have all the required details over here: ID, name, email, and then password, right? Because the password matches. Let me just type some random character over here and then I'll save it. Let's hit back the request. This should not be working because the password doesn't match. And how we are going to verify that? We are just going back in the code, and then here you can see that invalid credential. From where it is coming? Of course it is coming from somewhere in the program. How we can say that? So our logic is inside auth service, right? So here only we are throwing that error. We are returning those error here, and then on the controller what we are going to do is we are just passing those error to the context object. So this error is getting printed from there, and then it is not able to find because the password mismatches. Now we have successfully tested the login API as well as create API, which is working fine. Next thing what we are going to do is we are going to handle the error in our Golang application, and for that we already know that we are going to use a centralized mechanism. What does that mean is we are going to use a single point of execution where all the response is going to be intercepted, and if that response contains any error we are going to intercept those error, and then based on that we are returning the custom error which we want and in the way we want. So let's go back to code, and then we will also learn the concept of middleware. What is middleware function? That is going to be also interesting concepts, and we'll see that in action. So
now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one more folder over here, and I'm going to name it as middleware. So finally we are going to learn what middleware is. Middleware is nothing but it's a similar kind of handler function which we are calling on, which we are defining and implementing on the controller. So it will have access to the context. So what we'll do is all those response which is getting returned back to the controller, or the request is coming on the controller, right? So in between that, so let's for better understanding what we'll do is we'll just go back to route, and here we'll see we'll have this route as well as the handler method, right? So between this route and handler method we can have a number of middleware function. What does that mean is middleware function, all the request which is coming from the network will land here on this path, and then the respective function will get called. But this function can be as many as which whatever we want. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to put one more function over here which has to be called before this login functionality. That is called middleware function. So it will have access to all those requests and the response. If it has access to request and the response, we should be able to change that. We should be able to modify those requests and the response. That is called middleware function. Why? Because it will be getting called between the actual controller handler method and between the routes, right? And we can have a number of middleware function in a single API. So for that, what I'm going to do is I will just go back to middleware folder, and here I'm going to create a new file, and I will name it as error handler. All right. So this middleware function we are going to create for error handling. We can have n number of middleware function. which can be related to certain functionalities. For example, we are going to create or we are going to authenticate token, right? That is going to be also a functionality which that middleware function has to be implemented on each and every API which we want to make secure, right? If it is not if it is going to be open API, we don't have to worry about, but if we want to secure any of the API, we are going to use those middleware. And then what it will do is it will perform it operation. It will just take out the token from the header, and then it will validate those token, and finally then only it will proceed to the controller. Why we are doing that? Because for example, in controller we can have n number of database operations or n number of functionalities which can block our main thread, or you can say which can block our application for certain duration of time, right? So for that, we have to make sure that we are for sure going to execute that functionality, or else if there's no proper data for that functionality, we are not going to execute that, and from the middleware function itself we are going to return the response. We don't need to pass it to the next handler function. That is of course going to be a controller function. So in between controller and in between routes we can have n number of middleware function. It will work in the way of sequence, right? So here what very first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one function, and I'll name it as the error handler. Fine. What is going to return is it is going to return gin.handler function. All right, not error handler, it is going to be gin.handler. But before that, very first thing first, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to name it as the middleware package, and then gin.handler func, you can see here, right? It will return a handler function. Of course it need to be a handler function at all. And then here what I'm going to return is a function which will return the context, right? Then we will be having the access to those context. What I will do is I'll just click next. Okay, but what I'm going to say is if I'm going to check for length of the error as well, since we have the context access over here, right? What I'm going to do here is I'm going to check the length of context.errors, right? And then if it is greater than 0, that means we have to handle all those errors here. And how, from where this error will be coming, we can go back to controller, and then we can see here we are assigning all those error to context.error. Now if this response is being returned, right, it can be intercepted in error handler here, and then we can basically transform this as per our needs, and we can pass a custom response to the client. So for that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take out those errors. What I'll do is I'll put context.errors, right? And of course I will be every time I will be returning only single error in the body, not in the body but the error. And then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to type error map, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one map object which is going to be of type string and any, right? And then default length is going to be 0. So now if error not equals to nil, right, if we have successfully passed those error from the controller over here, it should be able to find out those error here. And then if it is not nil, of course we'll be getting error, all those error which we have passed from the controller as a custom error. And here what we are going to do is we are going to split those error. That is why we did what we did here is we are formatting error in the specified format, so that we should be able to split this string and find out the exact data which we are passing it from here. So very first string is going to be our status code, and the second one is going to be our expectation was it is going to be actual error message, and then it next is going to be the value, right? This is what we were expecting. So I'll go back to error handler. Here what I can say is strings. We have strings package over there in the Golang, right? We are going to use that package, and then we'll be calling split method on this string, and what we are going to split is, of course, we are going to split error dot error, right? And next, on what basis we are going to split this string? Of course, we have defined there two colon, right? If we'll go back to auth controller, we can see we are going to split this string based on this two column, and the same we are going to use this here as a delimiter. So finally this string will be splitted into multiple array items, array of a string, and then what I am going to do here is I'm going to check if we want to debug this. So for that, what I'm going to do here is, since we are going to run our application on the production, right, and it is not good practice to put all those debugger by default. Instead, it should be configurable, right? That means if we are going back to env configuration file, here I'm going to put one more key, and that is going to be of type debug. Not debug, I am going to say debug, and then it's going to be type string, for example. So what I will do here is I will copy paste, and it's going to be debug and then debug. And what I'm going to do here is I'll just copy this and go back to env, not in this env but env file, right? Here I'm going to paste that key, and then here I'm going to pass some value. Let's say I will pass log. So why I'm going to take this as a string? Based on this string, later on if we want to perform certain types of debugging or perform certain type, I mean print certain types of debugging. Let's say we want to print log, or we want to print error as well. So based on this we are going to do that. But for the time being, I'm going to take it as a log, and here what I'll do is I'll just check is debug enabled, I'll say. So how we can test that? I'm going to use, of course, config for that, config, and then get env property, right? Here I'll pass debug, and then what I'll do here is I'll just check if is debug enabled. So if debug is enabled, and next what I'm going to do is it will give some value, right? So we are going to check it against some value, and we can say if length of, you can say splitted string, right, splitted error is greater than 0, that means we have error over there. Not 0, in this case we are going to say we should have multiple errors, since we are returning custom error, right? In that case only we are going to debug those errors. So in this case we are going to say if it is going to be okay. In this case what I'm going to do is we should not check for greater values, instead we'll just check for 0. So then it should debug, it should print all those actual error, right? For that what we can do is, or else we can just check if it is going to be of length 1, not length 1, let me take at 0 for the time being, and then what I'm going to do here is I will just do fmt.println, right? Or we can print the formatted string. How we are going to do that? We are going to use printf function for this, and then here we can say status code. Status code is what? Status code is, you can say status code is %s, every value is going to be string, and then we can say message as well. Message is going to be what? The message which we get, which is we are passing it from there, it is also going to be %s. And then what else we will be having? Okay, one more thing I want to add over here so that we can know easily from where this error is actually originating. For that what I'm going to do is I will just add one more thing over here. I will add a method name. So for that I'm going to use %s once more, and then here I'm going to pass the method name. So what is the method name here? It is going to be login. So what I'll do here is I'll just use fmt.printf to format this once more, and here I'm going to pass %s,
and then not percentages, sorry, we don't need that actually. What we need here is, okay, this is going to be the method name, right? So we can write the method name as a hard-coded string here. That is not going to be a problem. But since this method is registered on the auth controller, right? So we can type here auth controller, and then with underscore we can write login, so that we can easily identify when this error is actually throwing from the function login, right? So I'll just save it, and then you can see we just save it, and then finally I'll just copy it from here. That means totally we will be having 1 2 3 4 5 value over there, right? So I'll come back here, and what I'll do, not here but I'll go back in user controller. Here also we need to do the same thing. So I'll just copy paste here, but in this case this is going to be user controller, right? User controller, and then this is not going to be a login, instead it's going to be a create user. So I'll just delete it and I'll save it. Now I'll go back to error handler. Here we can say we'll be having 5 values, right? So what we are going to print here is, actually we are going to print the actual error. For that, let's print all those errors which is getting written from there. So for that, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to print the method name as well. So very first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to print method name from where the error is originating. Okay, so error is originating from the %s as well, and then totally we have 3 values over here: method name, status code, message, and then 2 values more is going to be there, the exact error, right? Exact error is going to be, what I'm going to say is exact error, and then exact error is going to be again of %v, I can say that is going to be exact error. And before that we should have, let me once more verify it from the controller. Very first thing is going to be status code, and then followed by 4 values. So 4 values is going to be nothing but the bad request 2 3 and 4. So actual error will always be there, and then error. But the second is going to be the method name. First one is going to be bad request, which we are going to, basically we are going to pass this to the user. So for that we have put percentages, but here we don't need this, so we can remove 1 percentages from here, and this also we can remove it from here. Now I'll save it. I'll do the same thing in user controller as well. We don't need 1 extra percentages, and we can remove this. So finally we will have 1 2 3 4. 1 2 3 is there already, 3 is only there. Okay, we don't have to worry about that. 1 2 3, right? So first one is going to be message, second one is going to be the method name, and third one is going to be the error itself. So first one is going to be message, second one is going to be status code, and third one is going to be error itself. And how we are going to print this, we are going to put 2 thing over here, not 2 thing but the 3 thing over here, and we can say method name, status code, error, and then the actual message which we want to pass. So actual message also we are going to pass over here, message, or we can say client message, so that we can easily identify it is going to be passed to the client, right? For that I'm going to use %s, right? Method name is going to exist on index where index 2, and then index first is going to be the status code. So what I will do here is index first, right? So index first is going to be the method name is going to be on 2, right? So for that, first parameter is going to be method name here, so I'm going to pass index 2. What I'll do is splitted error of index 2, that is 0 1, right? Now next thing we need to pass the status code, which is obviously going to be 0th index, right? Since very first we have formatted that as a status code, and then we need the client message, and when we are going to get the client message, client message we are going to get on second, right? We are going to get on the second parameter. So I think it should be the okay, method name. Let me just arrange it properly so that we'll get all those data properly here in the printf statement. So the method name is of course going to be 1. Is it going to be 1? Let me verify that. Okay, method name is going to be 0 1 2. No, method name is going to be 2, and then this is correct. Splitted string of 0th is going to be of type status code, and then splitted error of first is going to be the client message, I believe. Let's go back and check it once more. Yes, it is going to be of client message 0 first, and then finally at last we'll be having the actual error. For that, of course we are going to use splitted error of 3. So 0 1 2 3, right? Now it should be properly formatted, and then finally what we are going to say is, let's say status code. We are going to put status code over here, and status code, you can say status code, and status code exists at which index? It is going to exist on 0th index. So what I will do is I will use a string conversion package over here of Golang. It has lot of utility methods which we can use and perform certain operation on a string. So here what I'm going to say is just convert it to integer. Since we are getting all those data in the string format, so what it will do is it will convert it to I, that is convert it to integer. Here I am going to pass splitted error of 0th. It will pass, okay, and then this is going to return me two things. First one is going to be integer, and then another one is going to be error. So if it is an error, of course we are going to return. If it is an error, we'll check for the error. We cannot skip this error, otherwise it will break our application. For that I'm going to check nil, and then here what I'm going to do is I'm going to just reassign this status code to, for example, 500. That means there's no status code there, so I'm default appending 500 to the status code. Now next thing what I'm going to do is I'm just going, since we created error map, so overall any error which is going to be thrown by application, it has to be in a certain format, right? It has to be reach the client in a format. So for that what I'm going to use is error map, and here I'm going to append the actual message, and the client message is going to 1 2 3 right here. 1 2 3, of course first one is going to be the client message, so I'm going to assign client message over here. We are not going to pass the exact error to the client, instead we'll just pass the error which we want to show it to client. So next what I'm going to say is error map of status code should also be there, right? So then in that case what I'm going to say is it is going to be of type, not type, but it is going to be at index 0. Alright, not status code, we can actually pass the status code here, status code, since we have that status code, and then we have message status code, and finally what we need is message status code, and that is it, right? We don't need anything more. Then finally we are going to return the JSON from here, and here what will pass is status code and then the error map, right? Finally we have created the error handler, and then we are going to use this error handler on each of our routes, so that if any error occurs, it should be able to catch those error, and it should be able to format the error in the way we want. And if the debugging is enabled, of course it should print those error over here as well. So for that what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to root file, we need this middleware function to be used somewhere in the router, right? We need to register this middleware function. For that, what I can do is I can do that over here, as well as what I can do is I can go to each of those route and assign those middleware here as well. But this is since we can have n number of, we can have 1000 APIs, right? And if we are going to put that error middleware in 1000 APIs, that is of course not going to work, right? It will be working actually, but the thing is our code is not going to be structured. Our code is going to be grow. Our code base is going to be grow, right? That does we don't want that kind of functionality over here. Instead, it should be centralized so that it can be feeded once and then everything will be handled automatically. So what I'll go back here is I'll go back on the main route and I will register that middleware error over here as well, over here only. So I can just write comment register, you can say register middleware error handler middleware, you can say error handler middleware, right? Now throughout this course I won't be using the terms middleware function, but I will be using middleware. You can understand it as a middleware function. So what I'll do is here is router dot use. We have use function over there, since this R is nothing but the instance of the application, you can say, right? So this application is going to use error handler, right? And where that will come from, we have that in the middleware. We'll import middleware and we'll just click on dot, and then we should have access to that middleware function error handler, right? Now we have successfully registered that middleware error handler, and then finally I'm going to restart this application and we'll see that in action. It should be working fine if everything goes fine. Okay, application has been restarted. I'll go back in Postman. I will try to invoke this API once more. This time previously we saw that we were not getting any error back to the client since we were not handling that explicitly. This time we have centralized our error handler, and then we should be able to get those error in the specified format which we have already written there, right? So let me just trigger this request and let's see how it goes. Still we are getting 500. Why we get 500? Let's see that. So we can see that index out of range, which is going to be 2. That means we have error over there, but we don't have that index. It is going out of the bound. So for that, what we are going to do is we are just going inside this error handler function, and then we are going to see if we have all this splitted string over there, then we can be able to use that. So I'll put a debug pointer over there. I'll put a debug pointer here as well, and then I'll just re-trigger this API, and you can see we got this error. We are able to intercept those response here. That is one good factor over here, but we will rectify rest of the error here as well. So we can see here splitted string contains only one message, which is invalid credentials, right? And we don't have 0th, 1, 2nd or 3rd. So in that case, of course, it is going to break. For that, what we are going to do is that is not going to work. In this case, we should have some more condition to properly handle that error. So in that, let's say, for example, if we are passing error from the controller, right? In that case, we will be having for sure these 4 variables, right? Then we can say that, okay, this is a custom error which is written from our application. But what if we don't have the custom error, right? In that case, what I'm going to do is, instead what we'll do is, since we are going to check for error at each point of time, so what I'm going to do here is I will just copy it from here, and then if I'm going to return any error, I will use the same kind of functionality from
anywhere in the program wherever we are checking that, or else we can do the same thing over there as well, but that is not going to be more specific about error. So let's do that on the service layer itself. I'll go back to user auth service first, and then if login is throwing error here, from here we are returning error, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return this error, and this time it is going to be bad request, and this time the error is getting thrown from the user service, not the user controller. So what I'll do is I'll change the method name, and here it is going to be login, right? And finally the error which we are getting over here, but since we have error, in that case what we can say is it is going to be invalid credential. All right, why? Because we can say that the previous error is already getting handled here, which is of course the error which is unexpected or getting thrown by internal application, or you can say internal MongoDB connection. But here we know that, we are sure that this error is getting thrown from our side. We are basically formatting this error and returning back to the client. So in this case we can of course do this, and here I'm not going to put bad request, instead I'm going to return invalid credential over here, credentials. And since this is going to be actual error, so we don't have to worry about it, and we can just paste the actual error over here. So here I will just put invalid credential, I'll save it, and this time it is going to be 401. I'll save it and rerun the code, and let's see that in action. Now server is getting restarted, and we'll see what happens next. You can see our server has started successfully, and we are going back in the postman, and we are going to trigger the request. We'll just trigger this request, and then it will come over here, and then I'll just hover on it, and we can see over here we will have this 401 invalid credential, user logging, and then finally the error which is coming as the nil here. So we'll talk on that, why it is coming nil, but let's see that. Since you can see here we have already enabled the debug, that is why this particular function is going to print the actual error. Then from the program, in the program we are not going to print anything in any of the file, that is going to be pure logic. If I'm going to write a functionality, it should be of that functionality. It should exclude the logging of the error and then handling of the error, right? We'll just pass the error, and then middleware function, which is error handler, should be responsible to handle that, right? This way we can make sure that it is following the solid principles. Of course it is going to follow single responsibility principles. So you can see here we are going to see this on the console, and then based on that we can see that in production, okay, we are getting this error. And here also we saw that email is not an object ID, that is getting printed here. And then for that, what I'm going to do here is, in this case we are getting nil over here, but there are certain errors which need to be handled as well. It should not be nil actually. Here error should not be nil. Of course error should not be nil. Why? Because all the error, it has passed the error condition over here, and error is going to be nil in this case. But since the password got mismatched, that is why we are returning as an invalid credential. So instead of error, what I'm going to do is of course password mismatch. I'm going to print password mismatch, but this time this is going for our internal application only. None of the user is going to see that. This is just for our purpose, so that we can debug this application easily if there's any error coming on the production or during development itself. I'll just resave it and restart this application. Before that, I'll go back in this function as well. Here what I'm going to see is find one by key, right? So find one by key is going to print certain error over here, which I'm no more interested to print here.
I don't need this actually, and then I'll just allow access. I'll save it and rerun our application so that we don't have unnecessary print of any print statement inside our code. Instead, it should be handling the business logic the or the functionalities which it is responsible for. So I'll just click restart and let's see once more what we are going to get next in the response. So application is now restarting, and then we'll go back to, of course, it is asking me to allow every time. And it should be allowed by default. But let's see. We'll go back to Postman and then I'll click send. And then you can see it is coming over here. I'll remove all those breakpoints from here, right? I'll click on play so that request can go proceed further. So you can see here we are getting password mismatch, which is the exact error which we are printing on the console. And then if we'll go back here, we can see here we are getting message invalid credential. So internally we should be able to see the exact error, but on to the specific user we don't want to expose the exact error. Instead we are going to put a proxy error, and then based on that we are going to return it back to the client. And the status code is of course going to be 401 in this case because the password mismatch. Now next thing, basically we have successfully created this error handler and we have successfully console this. One more thing I'm going to show you is if I'll go back to env and then I'm going to delete it, right? This time we are not going to print any error, so we should not be getting any print onto the console, right? We'll just get the response back and that's it. So this is how our application should work, so that debugging will always be easier and it should be configurable. So I'll just click on allow access and then I'll go back to Postman. I'll hit that API once more and you can see we got the same response, invalid credential. But when I'll go back to application and then still it is coming, right? It's coming somewhere from, not from somewhere, but it's coming from error handler configuration only. So if it's checking for if is debugging enabled not equals to empty string, right? But somehow it is getting not equals to empty string, right? Somehow it is not getting the empty string, that's why it's coming inside. You can play with this and you can omit that. If it is not there, that means we are no more going to execute this functionality. It should not print any console over there, right? So that's what we are going to make. All right, so I leave it to you. You can play around with this functionality and you can rectify this. If you still face any issue, you can put down your comments in the comment section. I will rectify it over the next videos. That is it for this video. We have successfully created both of the application, but we will see next thing, like we are going to create token and how we are going to authenticate the request. We'll see all those things in the upcoming videos. But for now, we have created a create user API and we have created login API through which we should be able to log in. That is the basic functionality which we need when we are going to create a client application. And there we will be creating a small page, not a small page, but we are going to create a login page where we are going to feed the user information. For example, we are going to give email and then password. Based on those email and password, we should be able to log in successfully, and then we should be able to call the respective API after login successfully. So that all we'll see next in the video. That is it for now, and if you guys have any issue, you can of course comment in the comment section. Thank you guys, we'll meet in the next video.